Welcome to Asiatique. I'm your host, Dr. Raymond. Just last week, Representative Liz Cheney, the once high-ranking Republican who defied her party to wage a lonely crusade against former President Donald Trump, hinted Wednesday about a White House bid after losing her Wyoming primary in a landslide. And together with FBI's recent raid on Donald Trump's resort home Mar-a-Lago, what do these imply for China? Now, with all the military drills around Taiwan and the atmosphere being so tense around the island, why is that the above could mean no immediate war for China and the US? In this week's episode, we'll have a look at this. Well, thousands of miles away from the U.S. capital, Washington, D.C., Wyoming is probably one of the states with the smallest population of just around 500,000. And rumor has it that there are probably more antelopes than there are people there, and the lowest representation government. Now, the state has become the center of a bitter battle, and some say for the soul of the Republican Party. And what's more, Wyoming has become so symbolic in representing the deep cracks within the party. And mind you, at Wyoming, 70% of the voters backed Donald Trump in 2020 presidential election. So a battle between the new Trump's Republican Party and the Republican Party that we once knew, or that could be the Republican Party of the past, has just started. Now, if you happen to know, Liz Cheney was a supporter of Trump, and according to reports, she backed his legislation like more than 90% of the time. But when she took him on over his stolen election lie, anger towards Liz Cheney grew, and there were even death threats. Liz Cheney was vying for a fourth term, and her major challenge came from the Wyoming-born and bred Harriet Hageman, who ironically actually attempted to block the nomination of President Donald Trump in 2016. But now, Hageman is all Trump. Now, for almost like half a century, the Cheney family has represented Wyoming in U.S. politics, yet now it looked as if they were on rocky ground. Yet Cheney was so undeterred that she still works her best as the vice chair of the January 6th committee along with the Democrat colleagues, even when her Republican voters were starting to desert her. Now, Cheney has indeed become an unlikely ally of the leading Democrat Jamie Raskin, and in this rare bipartisanship. Now, from the Democrats' perspective, according to Raskin, those who won't listen to the J-6 committee findings are so indoctrinated and brainwashed that they can't even hear the truth from the people in the party. Yet if you check again, Hageman's statements are very clear. Wyoming people just don't want a representative who spent most of her time in Washington, D.C. working on the J-6 incident. Now, people of Wyoming actually wanted someone who is more businessman-like and work on practical stuff, as the economy in Wyoming is not good. And I mean really not good. What people are worried about are the price of food at the grocery store, the price of gas, and not the J6 thing. And people just don't want to see Liz Cheney spending most of her time trying to convict Donald Trump. So, with Trump's endorsement, Hageman was then in the lead. Well, she eventually won, yes, of course, and she won a landslide victory. And according to some news reports, even old-fashioned Republicans in Wyoming, when asked, said they were dismayed and disturbed when they see the Republican Party actually have lost its way. And according to them, the atmosphere in the Congress should be more congenial and respectful among people from the two parties. And Cheney's chasing after Trump wasn't what they wanted to see at all. So now that Liz Cheney has lost her primary as everybody expected, what's next? Well, a lot of people got the sense from her concession speech that she plans to run for president in 2024. But if she does, so as a Republican, where is the hope? The nomination would almost certainly go to either Donald Trump or to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. But if Cheney could find herself a centrist Democrat as a running mate who endorses Republican fiscal policies and also opposes gun control, well, that might be a different thing. But where do you find this kind of a person? Indeed, Cheney's defeat is an unusually disciplined effort by Trump's team. A far-flung, often chaotic constellation of operatives whose disorganization, fueled by Trump's impulsiveness, has often impeded their attempts to influence campaigns. Now this time, the well-organized Trump force swamped Cheney, who by the end appeared less focused on surviving her re-election fight than embracing a high-profile national role as a Trump critic. So now going back to Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago raid. Oh, actually, the FBI's Mar-a-Lago raid, which happened just on August 8th. Now, the FBI recovered more than 300 classified documents in separate batches from Trump's resort home in Florida, Mar-a-Lago. And among these documents were communications with the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and the former President Barack Obama, according to the New York Times. So it is also said that even the U.S. National Archives have spent much of the time in 2021 trying to retrieve those government property from Trump, but to no avail. And according to sources, even after the extraordinary decision by the FBI to execute a search warrant at Mar-a-Lago on August 8th, investigators have sought additional surveillance footage from the club. Yet the U.S. Department of Justice investigation is still continuing, suggesting that officials are still not certain whether they have recovered all the presidential records that Mr. Trump took with him from the White House. So what has this to do with Liz Cheney? Now, Cheney said there was no political motivation in carrying out an FBI search of the former President Trump's resort home. And according to what Cheney told ABC News, she said she had seen no evidence that there had been any political motivation. And on the heels of her congressional primary loss, Cheney said she will work to make sure that Trump would never hold the nation's highest office again. Ensuring that Trump never holds the nation's highest office again. And coupling this with a hinted intention for the US presidential election in 2024. Now that makes sense. But wait, do you know that while Donald Trump seems to be totally silent about the Mar-a-Lago raid, he actually takes in millions of FBI search? Now, Trump's team bombarded his supporters with more than 100 emails, per head, asking for money based on the FBI's search of the Mar-a-Lago club for classified material on August 8th. They totally paid off. Now, according to Washington Post, contributions to Trump Political Action Committee topped $1 million on at least 2 days after the August 8th search on his Palm Beach in Florida. Now, the daily hauls jumped from a level of 200 to 300,000 that had been typical in recent months. So FBI's raid seemed to have helped Trump in some ways. Does that mean that we should be expecting another Trump versus Biden in 2024? Of course not. Now, in a CNN poll, 75% of Democratic voters wanted somebody else other than Biden to run in 2024. But wait a minute, what has this to do with China? Okay, now a little story first. Now in 2017, after being in the White House for like half a year, Donald Trump flew to Paris for the Bastille Day celebrations thrown by President Emmanuel Macron, the new French president. Now Macron staged a spectacular martial display to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the American entrance into the First World War. Now the event seemed to be calculated to appeal to Trump, his sense of showmanship and grandiosity, and he was visibly delighted. Now the French general in charge of the parade turned to one of his American counterparts and said, "You are going to be doing this next year." Sure enough, Trump returned to Washington determined to have his generals throw him the biggest, grandest military parade ever for the 4th of July, and the generals, to his bewilderment, reacted with disgust. "I'd rather swallow acid," said his defense secretary, James Mattis. Now, struggling to dissuade Trump, officials pointed out that the parade would cost millions of dollars. But that clash was even clearer when Trump told his new chief of staff, John Kelly, about his vision for Independence Day. "Look, I don't want any wounded guys in the parade, okay? Now this doesn't look good for me," Trump said. Now Trump explained with distaste that at the Bastille Day parade there had been several formations of injured veterans, including wheelchair-bound soldiers who had lost limbs in the battle. Now Kelly could not believe, his chief of staff could not believe what he was hearing. "Those are the heroes, man," he told Trump. "In our society there's only one group of people who are more heroic than they are, and they are buried over in Arlington." So how Trump responded was that, "I just don't want them, it just doesn't look good for me." Now from this little story, Trump might look totally exclusionary, but on the other side, he actually cared more about the business side of America. Well, he wanted things to look good. Now, even though he waged trade wars against China, President Donald Trump was in fact the first president in modern history who did not start a new war. Indeed, according to Reuters, it was former President Carter, and Ford joining Trump in not starting or escalating existing foreign conflicts with U.S. military involvement. So Trump may be a show guy. Yes, he is a show guy, not a fighter. He may be crazy in the eyes of a foreigner, but at least he loves life. So given the fact that no Southeast Asian nation has been willing to support the Trump administration's hostile and ideological position on China, Trump knows too well. Today, this time that if he's ever going to be elected again, he would play safer and nicer in dealing with the US economy. So when Dick Cheney said while supporting her daughter this early August that Trump tried to steal the last election using lies and violence to keep himself in power after the voters had rejected him, and that Trump is a coward and that a real man wouldn't lie to his supporters, etc., etc. Now, if what a coward did was just to make sure Americans live better lives, better economy, well, a bit of Showtime military parade without major casualties or injuries, no wheelchairs, remember? Well, then that sounds fine to me as an Asian. So we want no wars, and we don't start wars. Where after all, according to previous research, a Democrat-controlled Senate is more likely to approve war. So if the Democrats want war before 2024, with China, so as to make Biden the wartime president, or if the hawkish Republicans want war for whatever reason, they all would have to do away Trump first. So for Liz Cheney, while she's all for returning confidential documents to their rightful place, but if that helps returning Trump to the White House, she would say it's a bad idea, bad bargain. But for Trump, returning a few classified documents in exchange for the presidency, now that's good business, isn't it? So this time, Liz could be wrong. So until then, ciao.
Before you leave, please be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share this with your friends. See you in the next episode.